Welcome to Unbounded Greatness.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We bring ordinary people who have done extraordinary things, and we bring mentors for people. They can learn from these mentors through their journey of success in money, in business, and in career. So today we have Dingani Masuku, who is an international journalist, and he's really doing quite well in his career. He is at the top of his game in international media and working for the Australian Broadcasting Commission. He has won a number of awards like the Walkley Award, the UN Media Award TV, the UN Media Award Radio, and the Rory Peck Finalist Award. Welcome, Dingani.
Thank you.
Well, you're really doing great. You're at the top of your game in the media industry and as a journalist, and there must have been very many people who you were being interviewed with in the ABC company. What did you do that made you stand out from everyone else during the interview?
That's a very difficult question to ask, but I just think if you just do your job well, be truthful, be not biased, be objective in your reporting, people will recognize what you're doing and then subsequently award you for it.
Wow. So the mindset that you picked up, right, that made you different and made you stand out from everyone else, apart from doing your job quite well. What was this mindset that you had to adopt that set you apart from the crowd and from everyone else?
I think as journalists we have we don't have to be biased. We have to be truthful in whatever we're reporting. We have to be objective. And once you put those in your line of work as a journalist, you are surely going to succeed, and you won't have many problems, I guess, as other journalists will be having. Journalism is a very tempting field in the sense that it doesn't pay. And when it doesn't pay, there are people who are ready to pay all the time. And I'm sure, you are familiar with people saying brown envelope, and that happens a lot as journalists. So I think as a media personnel, you should just desist from that. Don't take a bribe. Just be content with what you are making. And after all, I think it's a profession which does not enrich you really. It's a profession which is fulfilling, which is done out of passion more than anything else. So I'm guessing I'm just like that. So I've never taken a bribe in my line of work, and I would never take a bribe in my line of work. So I think that on its own then does set you apart. And also giving people fair play. Don't judge people. You're not there as a judge if you're a journalist. You're there to tell what people say and what people think without any bias, fear, or favor. You're just giving it as it is. You are not there to put words in people's mouth. You are giving a platform for people to say out what they want to say. And also identification of stories is a very important thing as a journalist, and that will set you apart. Look at what your audience want. Look at what does the world need at this point. A case, an example, you cannot be telling a wedding story in a country where there is a famine and you are running to the, you are telling the most important things. I'm not saying weddings are not important, they're important, but you don't want to miss the ball by being sidelined and telling a story of this politician who has bought a Porsche, or this politician who has bought this while there are people starving. Your priority will be to the less privileged, to the people who don't have a voice. You are there to give them a voice. So I guess that will set you apart.
Wow, that is quite interesting. And you've mentioned something about bribes, and you've never taken any bribes from anyone. How bad is bribing in the industry in Africa?
Well, bribing is very rife in Africa. I think world over. I mean, I can't say in Africa. It's world over. Multinationals would want to bribe you because they don't want you to expose the pollution they'll be doing. They don't want you to expose the exploitation of the local population. So they would bribe you. Politicians are very good bribers because they don't want to expose you to expose whatever they are doing. So it is there, it is always there, and it will always be there. So journalists then have to be a part, just stand out and know your calling. Your calling is impartial reporting. And once you start taking bribes, then the impartiality falls off.
Wow, that is really interesting. And that speaks about the state of journalism in Africa. You've had an experience of over 10 years in journalism and in the media field. What is the state, according to you, what is the state of media in Africa, in the number of countries that you've worked in?
Look, number of countries differ. I've had the privilege to work on over like 10 countries, over 10 countries or over 12 countries in Africa. And they differ. So probably I would just like to give examples of how countries and how journalism changes. Look at Africa, South Africa, for example. I think it's one of the best countries to work as a journalist, and I've worked in that country. Media laws are very lax as long as you as long as you can prove that you are a journalist, then you have the training to be a journalist, and you are working for a certain media company, then it becomes easy for you to report in South Africa. But look, prior to 1994, journalists were killed all the time. Journalists were killed all the time because of the current government there. And then when South Africa got independent, that lessened as well. So it's the stage where the country is and the leadership which you have. It's interesting that a journalist can stand up and question the South African president about bribery, about stealing, about corruption. But you wouldn't do the same when probably in Zimbabwe during the Mugabe years. You wouldn't do that. So neither can you do that in Kenya during the Moi years. You cannot stand up and say you are corrupt. You cannot say that. So it's all the changes. So governance, when governance is good, journalism strives. When governance is bad, then journalism is a problem as well. Look at Somalia at the moment. 2 journalists were killed in 2019. Very, very good journalists who we lost. But the current environment in Somalia then would translate to a hostile environment. And when there is a hostile environment, journalists do die. And they die all the time because there's no accountability in that country. One thing with journalists is you are fighting for accountability, you are fighting for people to be heard. And politicians hate that. They don't want it to be questioned. They don't want it to be held accountable. But unfortunately, that's our job. So journalists then died on the line of duty. And also in conflict areas, take for example Somalia. I'm going back to Somalia more and more. But in conflict areas, no one wants whatever they do to be exposed. Even the good guys, sometimes they don't want them. They don't want to be exposed. I mean, it's interesting that the Kenyan army is in Somalia, and we know they are very good. They're doing good work. But how many reports have we heard about them? Or whatever they are doing there, they wouldn't want the accusations of trade with coal and all those things. Those stories, they don't want them to come out. But we come back home here in Kenya. Kenya is a very good country for journalists at the moment. We're working well, but obviously after the Westgate, the Westgate attack, obviously there were lots of things which were curtailed and journalists were restricted in many things. You cannot report other things. Then you really don't want that in a country as good as Kenya. So countries are different, but and we go and look at Egypt, Al Jazeera journalists being arrested, and someone is still there, like 5 years later, they're still in prison, an Al Jazeera journalist, and there's no accountability. Whereas his Australian counterpart, because his government could talk nicely, is out. So it's all those things about African countries, so the state of media, probably I can say the state of media is 50-50. I mean, we have got very good laws, NEPAD, and which is like a peer review of African countries, is helping journalists a lot to say, look, guys, media freedom should be appreciated and all that stuff. All that is a step in the right direction, but not all countries are embracing that.
Wow, that is quite interesting to know that. That is really sad to know that journalists are losing their lives in the line of duty. And it really shows a lot to the freedom of media in the different countries. And it has been quite a long journey with trying to fight for the freedom of media, So how far do you think we are with gaining complete freedom in the media?
Well, look, there has been really good trends and stuff like that. And we have been lucky. And probably I should point out something, as much as it's killing the media platform, things like social media, it's killing the mainstream media, but look, it's also giving journalists a breather. Because if I don't break it, or someone will. And of course, it's not well received, but someone will say something. So that on its own is also cushioned journalists. But look, that obvious social media is not journalism. Journalism is more in depth than that. So as much as that is cushioning anger towards journalists and stuff like that, still journalists are in danger.
Wow, that is so. Well, how important is the freedom of media to not only the journalists, but also to the people who depend on the journalists for the news and just to be kept on the know?
Look, freedom of media is very important. Media is development, actually. When there's no media, the country does not develop because you don't have a barometer, you don't have accountability, and for people as well. A good thing is during this COVID-19 era, journalism is very important. It gives information. It gives people. It enlightens people and tells people about pandemics. About Ebola, about all these things, about wars, about how to behave. You can even all facets of society, weather and stuff like that. I mean, you'd want to know if there's a storm, that then you won't go there, isn't it? So journalism does protect lives, does help facilitating development, does help governments to be accountable, and governments to be able to govern well by having information that this is happening, and then the government then knows what is happening in its backyard. That is journalism.
You've mentioned about the COVID-19 era and journalism. How was the media, because many industries have been affected, mostly negative because of the COVID-19 situation. How has the media been affected during the COVID-19 time?
Well, the media fraternity is not spared from this. I mean, we've seen big giants like CNN, Al Jazeera, Australian Broadcasting Corporation, laying off people, very, very well-seasoned journalists who are very experienced, who could contribute a lot in this in this pandemic are going. And so journalism is not been spared. People are losing jobs. People are losing the ability to tell stories. You cannot, it's not, you cannot travel from one country to another to go and tell a story, for example, because of COVID-19. And those are the effects which have come into the media fraternity. Newspapers are dying. Sales of newspapers are going down here in this country as well as anywhere else in the world. That is what COVID-19 has done.
So at a personal level, what challenges have you faced and have you encountered during this period, you know?
Oh, during this period, I mean, we have had to tell stories the unusual way. It's hard to be, I mean, it's hard as a journalist who need to be there, who need to be the eye, the ear. You need to observe to tell a good story. You need to be on the ground to tell a good story. You need to know what is happening. You need to see what is happening. But now we cannot do that. We tell stories through the screen. And for a journalist, you don't paint a picture. There's no way I can say, you know, the weather was like this, for example, to the listener. If I'm writing, I cannot say the weather was so bad. How do I know that the weather was so bad when I'm on the screen? I haven't experienced that. I cannot color the story and tell of the birds which were singing when I was going down the river. I cannot say that because all that is not there. So journalism has had to change during the COVID-19, and people who are not innovative cannot tell stories. So you really have now to really be on the top of your game and change your way of writing, change your way of telling stories, because it's no longer business as usual.
You've mentioned about telling stories and being at the top of your game at telling stories as a journalist. What is the most difficult story that you have had to cover in your journey of journalism?
Oh, interestingly enough, I think there are many stories which are really hard. But what comes to mind is a story which we did in Somalia of starving and dying children. I remember we saw this kid whose life was going out, and then we had to film that story, and filming the story knowing that by the end of the day, the outcome won't be a good outcome. The kid won't survive. So when we left that location in Somalia, when I was back in the hotel, I had to phone the doctor to say, I didn't even ask like, how is the kid doing? My thing was, did the kid survive? And for the doctor to tell me, no, the kid did not survive. So I remember I wrote a story about it, like when cameras stop, what happens? So you don't see it in the camera, but it's just right there on your head, knowing what is going to happen, knowing that kid won't survive, knowing that kid won't make it. It was one of the most difficult stories, and asking the doctor about the kid, but knowing that I saw a life coming out of someone, it's just so hard. So it's just such stories. Kids don't have to die of starvation. Kids don't have to die of malnutrition. 21st century, we should not be having all those things. I mean, people should be getting their acts together and saving the lives of children, but we can't as a human race. So I think that's a story I can say really touched my heart. There are many other stories I've told, but that story really keeps on coming back in my mind.
Wow, that is quite really sad and really touching. You know, you have told so many stories, and as you tell the stories, you've had to move from one place to another, different locations, and you have interacted with different people from different social backgrounds and from different economic backgrounds. What lessons have you learned from your journeys, you know, as you gather the stories and make the stories?
I think the biggest take home for me is all human beings are equal, and we all have a potential to care. We all have a potential to care for our neighbor. We all have a potential to care for our fellow countrymen or our fellow community member. So we should do that. We're not doing much of that. If only we could do more, then we won't be having the Kakuma refugee camp. We won't be having the Dadaab refugee camp. We won't be having, refugee camps in Uganda, in Zimbabwe. We won't be having that if we care more. We just need to care. Once we care, I think we have a better world. I mean, so I'll just take you back to South Africa. In South Africa, if you're a refugee, you're not put in a camp. You're put in the community to live with other people. You're not caged like an animal. You're put in the community to find your own way in the community, as long as you gain that refugee status. So we need to do that as communities or as countries. It's not enough to say, I am taking in a refugee, and then that kid grows up in a camp surrounded by thorns, and like in the Dadaab, where you have like a thorn compound surrounding a kid from birth till that kid is 17 years old. It's not fair. People should not live like animals. We should take people into our midst. If they are refugees, live with them. Let them be part of our community. And those people contribute great things. But now, if we face them, if we cage them, then we're curtailing development, we're curtailing benefits which they could bring in our own countries, even though they are not of our nationalities. So we should learn to care for more. And then the other thing I've learned is Africa should open its borders. There is no reason it becomes more expensive for me to fly from Kenya to Ghana, but it's less expensive for me to fly from South Africa to Britain. I mean, because Africans were greedy, our airspace is expensive. We should just cut those boundaries and just be Africa. So those are some of the lessons I've learned, that we need to do more as Africa.
Oh, those are really great lessons. When we hear it from someone who has really had the experience of interacting with people at a, first-hand level, it makes it, you feel more that you're in it. And, as you work, you've had colleagues from Africa. You've worked with people at an international level, both Africans and non-Africans. What do you think about the work ethic that we have in Africa?
Well, I think we've got amazing people in Africa. We have got really amazing people. I mean, just the smiles in the African continent will just melt you. I mean, people are very warm. But I think we have got this problem of saying we are educated to be workers. In most African countries, we're still taking that legacy of colonialism and putting it into our education system. We're not educating our kids to be the next engineer, for example, or to be the next builder, for example, or to be the next farmer, for example. But we will sit down there and teach our kids how to work for someone, and that is not enough. So Africa needs to get out of that and teach its kids, like, I want to teach you to build roads. There is no reason why Kenya should import a toothpick, or Kenya should import a face mask, a N95 face mask, and then or a ventilator, for example. There's no reason why we should do that. So we should teach our kids to be manufacturers. We should teach our kids to be farmers. We should teach our kids to be more than workers, to do things for themselves. I know it's difficult, but we should do that. We should teach our kids to be miners, not to wait for BHP to come and mine gold, not to wait for Anglo-American to come and do process tobacco in Africa. We should process our own tobacco. And that will only come when we start having a curriculum which builds kids to be able to work for themselves and not to be workers. But if we do that, Africa is a very young population. We can develop and be a really good continent. But once we don't do that, we will always be behind.
Oh, that is very interesting, because we really need to teach our children that they don't have to work for someone. They can actually use the resources that we have in Africa, to come up with things, to produce our own products, manufacture our own products. So in your career in journalism, what perspective do you have in your mind for your future, for your future intentions in your career?
Well, I think I've come to the end of my career, really. Almost 45. So there are lots of young kids out there who have got energy, who can run around with cameras, who can write great stories. I think it's time also just to leave them to do that. And I think the older generation now should be looking at other things when we still have energy. We should be settling down. There's no way I can be running down all these countries anymore. I just need to go back to my country, settle down, and take what I have learned in my career as a journalist and try to use it. Take the best which I've seen in many countries, like in Kenya. I've seen great farmers in Kenya. I've seen farmers coming together, forming circles, being able to supply milk as a unit, even though if you have one cow, but if your community there are 13 members of the community with 2 cows, then that becomes 26 cows. It's like owning a dairy farm, really. I've seen stuff like that in Kenya, people doing that. I've seen lots of young people in Namibia doing animal conservation. It's all those things which we should just take into consideration and say, yes, I've worked around, I've seen things. Now it's time to sit down and sieve all those things I've seen and try to say, I will use this in the remaining part of my life. I'm 45, I'm still young, so I still have energy to do other things. So I think this is time I should just now put the cameras down and do something else.
Well, it is such a wonderful thing and very inspiring to hear you say that you're 45 and now you want to step out of your career and give opportunities to the younger people. And there are so many young people who are looking up to you right now because you have been at the top of your game in the international media. You're now retiring and you're really still good at what you do. What advice would you give to the younger generation that is looking up to you?
Well, I think the advice I would give them is just be truthful, be honest, and put in the hard work. Recognition does not come when you don't put in the hard work. Put in the hard work. Don't be afraid to put in the hard work. And most young people now like shortcuts. We like to get rich and stuff like that. So if you're in careers like journalism, it's not about getting rich. It's about serving your community. It's about saving communities wherever you live. If you're a journalist, I don't know. I think a journalist is more of a servant than someone who's out there to make money, because really very few people make money in journalism. And I think great journalists don't make money, but they're just there to tell the stories. It's passion. So have the passion for whatever you're doing, and then you will do it well.
Wow, that is really good advice. Be honest, work hard, avoid the shortcuts. And that actually brings me to this interesting question. What is your legacy?
I don't know. I don't think journalists have legacies today. I don't think. I don't think so, but I think one day my young daughter will look on the internet and say, that story was done by my father. Or one of the kids I have reported on will look, say, that man saw what I was doing, and I think I'll just carry it on and be great as he has written that I'm a great person. I'll tell you of a story. There is a kid I met in Zimbabwe. That kid, I think, was around 7 years old. The father was living in another country, and then they came to Zimbabwe. And that kid told the father that I will look for toys to donate back into my village. That kid was 7 years old. And then fortunately, I just met the father somewhere and just like, what are you guys doing? Like, no, we came here to donate some toys and other things at the father's old school, actually. So the kid actually is the one who made that initiative to say, I'm going to go to this rural school and donate. It's such kids who I think will make Africa great. They know, they have compassion, and they are there to help. I just wish after some years that kid, when they grow up, they will look at that story and say, I started this when I was young. So it's such things which just give me joy. I don't know if I can call them legacies, but it's such things which I can identify and be able to tell the world that such and such a kid is doing this, and it is good.
Yeah, personally, I'd call them legacies because they'll not only inspire your daughter and that little kid, but also everyone else who comes into contact with your work. Everyone else who will read your work and see what you have done will actually get inspired by you and be challenged to be at the top of whatever they're doing, be at the top of their game in whatever field they're in. Well, that was it was very wonderful having you, Dingani. We have had great insights from you. We have learned a lot of lessons, and I believe that the audience has really gotten to know a lot about the media. And it's not just what we see. It's not only about the journalists looking good and doing all this work. There are challenges that the media field is facing, and you have to deal with them every day. But it is wonderful that the media and the journalism is just growing every day and becoming better in Africa. So thank you very much for joining us. And thank you very much to our audience. It was an honor having you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate it. And thank you for having me too.
Okay. Have a wonderful night. And for our audience, see you next Tuesday. As my Flynn Mentor will be our host next week. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.